All right, guys, it's Pat Stedman. We're back again on the YouTube channel. And today I wanted to talk about somebody I'm sure if you're watching this on YouTube, you've probably heard of. And that is Rollo Tomassi. Now, I'm going to just come out and say this very directly. I don't like Rollo Tomassi. I don't like him as a person. I don't think he's a good role model for men. And I'm going to talk about why I don't think he's a good role model for men. Now, I don't actually have beef with very many people. I don't like beefing with people. I'm not in the outrage content industry, and I don't like to create fights just for the sake of gain attention, that kind of attention marketing. I can usually see where people are coming from, and I think most people, if they have good intentions and I can suss out that they have good intentions, then I don't want to start arguments with them, even if there are things that I disagree with. But Rollo is one of the very few people who I do have issues with. And the reason I have issues with Rollo is because of both personal and ideological reasons. So let's get to the personal standpoint of this, the personal issues. I've been in the sort of Twitter space, manosphere Twitter space, going all the way back to 2015. And in 2017, in the aftermath of the election, it's important to understand that the Twitter space was very much built up around big personalities like Mike Cernovich, who at that time everything was done on blogs or maybe in forums. And moving things to social media platform was a relatively new idea. So Mike, during the 2016 election, he got really involved with political activism, and after the election basically became a political commentator and moved out of the men's self-improvement space, which created a big vacuum in Twitter that was very quickly filled by Rollo Tomassi, the rational male. And I was just at this point getting started as a dating and relationship coach. I was about 1.5 years into the business, really 2 years at this point into the business. And I was still trying to discover my voice to a certain extent. I had a lot of experience meeting girls, picking up girls. I knew the lore. I was recently married, but I was trying to wrap my head around a lot of the more red pill stuff and integrate it with other things that I knew, right? Things that I learned in other communities, like spirituality communities. And what I was seeing with all this different information is that it wasn't wrong. What I was seeing from the red pill, what I was seeing from spirituality circles, what I was seeing from, even sometimes mainstream dating advice, it wasn't wrong, but there was a context to all of it that was different. So I was trying to work to integrate this because I did see that there was profound truth within the red pill. It just didn't seem to me like it was complete. So I started grappling with this, and I read Rollo's book. And the first thing about reading Rollo's book was that it profoundly affected me. And I don't mean that in a positive sense. I've read, I don't even know how many books, hundreds of books on, the topic of women and intimacy. And when I came out of reading The Rational Male, I wasn't just simply getting information. I could feel that it was affecting me on an emotional level. And I was acting a little bit more suspicious and paranoid towards my wife, even though my wife has never, ever once demonstrated any negative, at-risk characteristics. And so I realized that there was it took me about 2 weeks, and I realized that within Rollo's book, there was this, it wasn't just information. There was an emotional narrative that was seeded into it, and there was a sort of distrust between the sexes, a distrust of women in particular, a negative outlook towards women that was couched underneath this sort of logic that actually existed. It was essentially, I was being manipulated through the book. I was being made paranoid. And nevertheless, there was good information there. And I've talked to other people over time, and a lot of guys have experienced the same thing as me. Some other guys were able to sort of not engage with that part of the book, which kudos to them. But the fact that me even having a lot of experience with women could feel some degree of effect from it, I think is troubling in terms of what it actually is teaching guys. So I started to engage with Rollo, and I wrote a series of essays on my blog talking about this, and it was really integrating a lot of red pill stuff with other domains. And I would ask Rollo questions and try to get his perspective of what do you think about, in these situations? Because Rollo was basically saying all of these relationships were the same, and that women were sexually opportunistic and hypergamous, and if you're a guy in a weak position, then your woman's gonna leave you, or she's gonna cheat. And I would point out that this stuff happens, but it also doesn't happen. And so clearly you can say that this is an input, you can say this is a biological input, but it's not the only input. That there's beyond that, there's a transcendent element, that you have your base nature, but through deeper emotional connection between you and a woman, things get built on top of that, and that ultimately have more power than any kind of, oh wow, a higher status man walked in the room, now she's gonna go now. Like, she's not, because her connection with you is so deep and so strong, and there weren't material explanations for that. It wasn't that the guy wasn't more attractive. It wasn't that the guy, had some advantage in another way. It was that there was a deep, profound emotional, spiritual connection. You could see this. You could see a guy gets sick and his woman takes care of him. A guy loses his job, his woman helps him out. Now, it didn't mean that the biological inputs weren't there and that some frustration was created. But the point is that it was not just that simplistic. So we had a series of ongoing conversations about this stuff, and he basically would not engage with the arguments, which is a very big red flag for me, because this is a guy who's being considered an intellectual forerunner, but yet he's unable to actually engage with these arguments. And what he started to do is he just called me purple pill. So to give you an idea, red pill are people who agree with what Rollo says. Blue people are people who are in the mainstream feminists. And then I was purple pill because I was taking too much from non-red pill circles, essentially. I was trying to blend it. And he'd make all sorts of crap like, this is just beta rationalizing of, and it was like, look, just fucking answer the argument. Just respond to the argument onto its merits. Okay, this is not a personal thing for me. I know that if I just simply operate based on the red pill perspective that you're talking about, though, I'm not going to have any intimacy or connection in my relationship. I might have power in my relationship, but I'm not going to have any intimacy and connection. So just explain these discrepancies. And he couldn't do it. And we had a series of public arguments, and which culminated in people wanting us to debate, to which he blocked me and refused to debate. Now, for like 3 years later, he kept saying, oh yeah, I'm happy to debate anytime. But then every time we'd have an interlocutor, somebody come in to do that, like Alexander Cortez, who was very neutral at the time, he would always find some way to get around it. And then he would say, oh, well, Pat Stedman wouldn't debate me because he apparently said on a show that I should have come on his show with like his 5 little butt buddies and debated all of them, rather than like what I was looking for was, let's have a one-on-one debate. Someone moderates it. We can have the conversation. So the point of all this stuff is that Rollo's a pussy, and because he doesn't actually allow people to confront his ideas coming from a more nuanced perspective. Rollo's happy to engage against a feminist because, let's be honest, feminists, it's really easy to beat down a feminist argument. And if your only choices are feminism and the red pill, maybe you're going to go with the red pill, understandably, because there's more of a biological truth to it. But if you're trying to actually understand what's going on in relationships, if you're trying to generate a healthy understanding that will allow you to have a deep and meaningful relationship rather than just not simply get, raped by a girl financially or emotionally, then he can't answer those kind of debates. He has no response to it. He just kind of runs away. So at that point, I lost a lot of respect for him as a man because I realized he's actually just an ideologue. And one of the things that you see with him is that everything is just a cult. He has a cult following. That's basically what it is. Everybody has the same response. You insult Rollo, he's like, Rollo's out here, he's saving men's lives. What have you done? He's saving men's lives. It's like, it's always this super white knight. It's actually really funny because Rollo is a very feminine person. He talks about masculine, he talks about being a man, but he's afraid of conflict. He has a very diminutive stature. I know multiple people who have met him in person, and they have all said the same thing. He can barely look you in the eye. He's very meek. He's basically a pussy and a coward, and he manipulates people into defending him very much like a woman. So you see all these guys who are like super white knight for Rollo, and it's always the same kind of refrain. And look, I will say this. Do I think Rollo has saved men's lives? I absolutely do. Because if you're a guy who absolutely is clueless with women, and you just were a good little boy who did what you're told your entire life, and you get burned by women over and over again, you get divorce raped, then discovering The Rational Male, the book, which tells you about all these ways that women are evil and opportunistic, and then having a community of guys who are telling you in turn, yeah, you're not the only one, women have done this to me too, it gives them a sense of belonging. It gives them a sense of, I'm not the only one here. And so for a lot of guys who might have felt completely hopeless, now he has at least some community that he feels like cares about him. And maybe his experience feels understood, and he's given some tools to protect himself in the future. But the problem is with Rollo and, the red pill as he's created it, is that you're basically looking at guys who've had their ship sunk, their ship of life sunk, and Rollo throws them a life preserver. And so they're floating in the ocean with this life preserver. They didn't drown as a result. So he saved their life. But then he won't let them leave the life preserver. He's out there warning them, don't you let go of that. Like, don't even think about trying to swim to shore. Because if you do, you might drown. You're going to drown if you leave it. And so you have all these guys who maybe aren't dying, but they aren't living. They're just bitter losers who essentially spend their whole life in fear of women, which is a very beta thing to do fundamentally, because you want to talk about alpha men, alpha males. Guys who are confident in themselves don't really care about women. They don't, I mean, they like women, they might want to be with women, but they're not worried what a woman might do to them. And so you get to this whole point of you have a guy who's telling you all these bad things about women, but the underlying message is that women are going to dominate you and take advantage of you if you're not careful. And that, it's the only way to protect yourself is to keep them at arm's length, which is when you now have tweets like he just made the other day, which are absolutely retarded, absolutely beyond the pale stupid. That, if you're a guy, you should get a vasectomy in your 20s, you should never get married. He's basically telling guys, don't have kids, don't propagate the human species, don't propagate your own genetic line, and just, try to get as much sex as you possibly can from women, and that's what makes you alpha, which is, by the way, not what he did. So he married a woman who was older than him and got her pregnant, and so he had to marry her. That was how he felt, and they had a terrible relationship. And I'm not gonna spill dirty laundry about it. I do know a lot of stories, but suffice to say, it's a terrible relationship. And when you see a tweet like this, it's got to be a really fucking terrible relationship, because he's telling guys not even to get married at all. It's like, don't do what I do. Don't get married. I mean, it's incredible that people will look at this and will see this is somebody who really has it figured out. This guy's got good advice. Think of how it must feel to be his daughter. Don't have kids. It's like, okay, your daughter was a mistake. I mean, he's just a pussy on every single level. And I don't think that guys should be following him. If you follow his work, if you take his work as gospel, then what's going to happen is that you are not going to actually live a full life. You're going to have negative feelings towards women. Just like feminists have negative feelings towards men, the red pill is just a complete inversion of that. It is a bunch of men who feel like they're victims of women and who are perpetuating a war between the sexes, which does not improve society, does not improve relationships. Yes, you need to understand that women have a dark side. You need to understand that women can be very opportunistic. You need to be able to gauge which women are more opportunistic than others, but every woman has this in their base layer, their base DNA, just like men do. Men have the same thing. If you talk about women being hypergamous, that women go after guys who have higher status than them, well, guess what? Men go for women who are younger and more fertile. So for every guy that's been divorce raped or, liked a girl and she went for a higher level guy, there's a woman who committed to a man and he had an affair with a younger woman. So, both sexes have a real dark side to them. And the point here is not to point fingers, which is just psychological projection. It's to understand it, integrate it, and transcend it. And to build on top of it, to know our darker nature, and to know when another person is stuck in their darker, lower consciousness, more base instinctual state, and to build from there. And that is what I do as a coach. If you read The Rational Male and you got value out of it, kudos to you. I'm not going to deny that the book has been influential, and I'm not petty. I'll even acknowledge that it probably had a net benefit on society, because even though Rollo didn't come up with these ideas, he did certainly help to mainstream them. And credit where credit's due. We do need to understand that women are capable of these things. But it's time for us to move beyond that. Rollo's incapable of evolving. He's still a scared little boy who's obsessed with female validation. He's a beta. And you should not be learning how to be a man from a man who acts like a woman. So that's it for the video today. If you want to work with me, link is in the bio. You also get my masterclass, 18 hours long. And I also have in the bio, if you want to see some of the lineage of this, I'm going to have each blog post, which goes back to 2017, 2018, where I outlined the development of my pushback against the red pill. I've been doing this for a really long time. I've been having arguments about the red pill guys for, I guess we're coming on 6 or 7 years. So people are like, where are your arguments? Dude, I was probably the first person to argue against Rollo Tomassi publicly. In 2017, he was a cult figure. And he still has a cult following, but it's getting smaller and smaller because people are realizing you just can't be a fucking loser anymore. And these ideas are for losers. Worshipping this guy, you're just a total fucking loser. So don't be a loser, and I'll see you guys next time.